Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission, well, it takes us somewhere maybe a bit unexpected for World War II buffs. The mountains of Eritrea.
Yeah, it's often overlooked, isn't it? But that short, really quite brutal East African campaign in 1940-41, it was crucial.
Crucial how? We're talking about transforming the Indian Army, right?
Yeah.
From basically a frontier force.
Exactly. Into the Allies' go-to mountain warfare experts. The skills they learned there shaped battles across the whole Mediterranean.
Okay, so this is a story about tactical evolution, born out of necessity.
Pretty much. We're digging into sources that detail these early campaigns. We're tracing how victories in Eritrea gave the Indian Army skills they'd later use against tough German defenses miles away.
Let's start at the beginning then, June 10th, 1940. Italy declares war. Suddenly, the British have a massive problem in their hands.
A huge problem. Their main supply line, the Red Sea, was suddenly very, very vulnerable.
Because Italy had troops not just in North Africa, in Libya.
But also in Italian East Africa. That's Eritrea, Italian Somaliland, and Abyssinia, Ethiopia. They basically had a pincer grip.
And they could choke off the Suez Canal, which was, everything for Britain at that point.
It was the artery. Think about it. Oil from the Middle East, Kirkuk, Mosul.
Manpower from India, resources.
Rubber from Southeast Asia. If that Red Sea route gets cut, the whole war effort becomes exponentially harder.
So job number one was securing that passage, making sure Sudan was safe.
Absolutely paramount. But Sudan was directly threatened by the Italian forces sitting right there in Eritrea. And the numbers, well, they were scary.
What are we talking about? Wavell, the commander-in-chief Middle East, he didn't have much, did he?
Not nearly enough. Maybe 36,000 troops in Egypt, another 9,000 in Sudan, so 45,000 total.
Okay, and the Italians?
Something like 415,000 men. Now, they were spread out across Libya and East Africa, but still a massive disparity.
A huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
So Wavell couldn't afford to wait. He had to deal with East Africa now, even before sorting out North Africa.
He had to split his forces. It was a gamble. Send some south through Somaliland and Ethiopia.
Right, the southern force, mostly African and South African divisions.
And then the northern force, the 4th and 5th Indian divisions, got arguably the toughest job. Punch through Eritrea, take out the Italians, and capture the port of Massawa on the Red Sea.
Massawa, that was the key.
That was the linchpin. Secure Massawa, secure the Red Sea.
Okay, so Eritrea is the linchpin, but the geography. It wasn't like the desert fighting in North Africa, was it?
Not at all. It was a geographical nightmare for an invading force. The Italians pulled back from the border town, Kassala.
In Sudan, yeah.
But then they dug in. They chose strong points specifically for their natural obstacles. Really tough terrain.
And the first taste of this was at Galabat, opposite Metemma in Abyssinia, November 1940.
That's right. And it immediately showed the challenges. It's undulating country, wooded, cut by this steep watercourse.
And the elephant grass, I read about that.
Yeah, 6 to 12 feet high. Imagine trying to fight in that.
So it's almost like jungle fighting, in a way. Did it just cancel out British advantages like tanks?
Pretty much negated the armor straight away. Bill Slim, later famous in Burma, of course, was commanding the brigade there.
And it didn't go well initially.
No. Air support was delayed by bad weather, so the Italian Regia Aeronautica actually had air superiority for a bit. Their Fiat fighters were better than the British Gladiators at that point.
And the tanks.
The
6th Royal Tank Regiment.
They took casualties, yeah. 21 tanks knocked out, but mostly not by enemy fire. It was the rocks, the hidden mines. The ground just chewed them up.
So the terrain basically fought for the Italians, even though their defenders, mainly Eritrean troops, didn't have much anti-tank weaponry.
Exactly. The terrain was the great equalizer there. And what's really interesting is how the Commonwealth forces adapted.
How so? If tanks and air support weren't the answer.
It came down to basic soldiering, the core skills of the Indian Army. Troops like the Pathans from the 4th 10th Baluch Regiment were brilliant in that terrain. Jebel, Zariba, for example.
Because of their pre-war training. The small war stuff on the northwest frontier.
Precisely. That training, fighting in mountains, suddenly became incredibly valuable. They knew how to move fast individually, use every bit of cover, and their rifle fire was exceptionally accurate.
They didn't need tanks to take and hold ground in those hills.
Not at all, and they learned fast. They developed these raiding tactics, using the tall grass for cover, moving like ghosts, almost like commandos.
And this raiding wasn't just minor skirmishes.
No, it was intense. They inflicted serious damage on several Italian colonial battalions. They were learning skills, jungle raiding skills, really, that they'd use years later against the Japanese in Burma.
Wow. So the learning curve started right there in Eritrea.
Absolutely. And this constant pressure, these infantry raids, eventually forced the Italians to pull back from Metemma by February 1941.
Which then led the Commonwealth forces directly towards Keren.
Ah, Keren, yes, the big one.
It has this reputation, doesn't it? The most outstanding battle of the campaign. Almost
Yeah.
like a fortress city.
It was incredibly formidable. It sits at, what, 4,300 feet? And the only way in is through this narrow, winding gorge, the Dongolas Gorge.
And the Italians had fortified everything around it.
Months of work, dugouts, gun emplacements on all the surrounding peaks. Cameroon Hills, Sancho Briggs Peak, Mount Amba, a natural fortress heavily reinforced.
So March 1941, the 4th and 5th Indian Divisions launched their attack.
Yeah.
And this is where the Indian soldiers, the Jawans, really shone.
They really did. Units like the Rajputana Rifles, the Maratha Light Infantry, their performance in that brutal hill fighting was often superior to the British units alongside them.
Just better suited to that kind of warfare.
It seemed that way. Their pre-war experience, their inherent skills in mountain terrain, it just clicked.
But Keren wasn't just about old-school mountain skills, was it? There was more going on tactically.
No, you're right. This is where we see this really interesting synthesis. They're taking their traditional strengths and merging them with new conventional warfare elements.
Yeah.
Well, things they'd picked up earlier in North Africa, in Cyrenaica, infantry tank cooperation where possible, and much better coordination with artillery and air support.
Right, that integration piece.
Exactly. There's a great example. The 2nd Marathas calling in really precise artillery fire 2 rounds just before they went in to attack a key feature called Flat Top. That shows real sophistication.
And responsiveness. It also sounds like the command structure was adapting, too. More flexible orders.
Yes, instead of rigid, centralized plans, commanders were given more freedom to react to the situation on the ground, which you absolutely need in that kind of chaotic, difficult fighting.
But some old ways persisted. Mules were still vital.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Even with modern radios, you still needed mules to haul ammo, water supplies, up those incredibly steep slopes. It was a mix of old and new working together.
And eventually it worked. Keren fell. When was that?
March 27th, 1941. That really broke the back of the Italian defense in Eritrea.
Opening the road to the sea and to Massawa.
Exactly. The campaign wrapped up with the capture of Massawa. The Italians made a last stand there, built these massive concrete anti-tank obstacles.
Dragon's teeth.
Yeah, millions of pounds worth of cement, apparently. But useless in the end against the Commonwealth tanks and engineers working together.
Yeah.
By July 41, it was all over in East Africa.
A relatively quick campaign, all things considered, given the initial numbers. Why did the Italians collapse so fast in Eritrea?
Well, a few key things. Their leadership tended towards passive defense, not really taking the fight to the Commonwealth forces.
Okay.
The loyalty and, frankly, the fighting effectiveness of some of their colonial troops wasn't consistently high, especially compared to the motivated Indian and other Commonwealth soldiers.
Right.
And technically, they lacked good anti-tank guns where it mattered, and their Air Force just couldn't provide the kind of close air support, the CAS, that their ground troops really needed when under pressure.
Makes sense. But the big takeaway here, the real legacy. It wasn't just beating Italy there. It was what the campaign did to the Allied forces, especially the Indian Army.
Absolutely. It was transformative. You have to contrast the fighting environments. East Africa, mountains, scrub, mainly infantry. Then immediately after, many of these same units go to North Africa. Open desert, tanks, mechanized warfare.
And the 4th and 5th Indian Divisions learned to master both.
They did. They became battle-hardened, multi-terrain divisions in that intense period between late 1940 and mid-1941. They learned tank cooperation in the desert, perfected mountain fighting in Eritrea.
That mountain warfare expertise, that seems like the really unique contribution that came out of Eritrea.
I think so. It was perhaps the most strategically valuable thing they exported from that campaign. The Indian Army became the conduit, transferring those specialist skills honed on the northwest frontier, refined under fire at Keren, directly into the European War.
And you see that pay off almost immediately.
Well, certainly it helped in North Africa in 42, stalling Rommel, but the real specialist application came against the Germans.
Where specifically?
In Tunisia, against tough German positions like Wadi Akarit and the Mareth Line. And then, most famously, in Italy, think about the Gustav Line, the Gothic Line, those incredibly tough mountain defenses.
So the Indian Divisions were key to breaking those, using skills learned back in Eritrea.
Absolutely. The 4th Indian Division, in particular, gained a reputation in Italy as one of the best, toughest, most adaptable divisions the Allies had, and much of that capability was forged at Keren.
So it shows that winning those later, much more famous battles wasn't just about Allied industrial might.
Not just about brute force, no. It was about having troops with highly specialized skills, honed in these earlier, maybe less glamorous, but incredibly demanding campaigns like the one in East Africa.
The sources really back that up, that the Indian Army's effectiveness grew directly out of this varied combat experience.
Yes, the evidence points to a steep learning curve. They successfully blended the conventional tanks, air power, artillery with their deep traditional expertise in mountain and infantry fighting.
So if someone asks, where did the Indian Army truly become the Allies' mountain experts? The answer really has to be Eritrea.
I think it's undeniable. The strategic need to secure the Red Sea forced the issue, turned Eritrea into this high-stakes proving ground. It gave them the practical, brutal training they needed to win in the mountains later on.
Okay, that brings us to a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. When we think about cracking those German lines in Italy Casino, for instance, that long, bloody struggle, we often default to this image of overwhelming Allied power.
Just throwing material at the problem.
Right. But what the story of Eritrea shows us is that success, especially in terrain like that, relied heavily on something else, sophisticated, often hybrid tactics. Those close-quarter, infantry-led mountain skills perfected at places like Karen.
It suggests that winning in World War II, even against the best the Wehrmacht could offer, wasn't always about having the most tanks or planes. Sometimes it was about having the right soldiers with the right, highly specialized skills often learned in forgotten corners of the war. Far from brute force, it was about tactical evolution.